hoping to talk about hope. I just actually got done filming a practice for my self expansion members, and it was all a practice about hope. And I think it's interesting that the world is coming around to recognizing other forces that have to do with our health and wellness and performance. These other forces, such as how much we're out in the light, or what types of light we are intaking in through our eyes, our skin, and our hair, right? So that's where, like, blue light from our devices may or may not be good for us. There's studies looking at the LED lights or fluorescent lights and how they impact prisoners or how they impact students. And as we begin to accept that standing on the earth barefoot is allowing for the body to do all of its own natural processes. What would you suggest for disc desiccation in the spine? We're talking about hope during this hour, but you need hope that the spine is going to be perfect for you, right? So start to frame that into what are you hoping? What are you hoping to be done with your spine? What do you think is the best bed to buy for health and wellness? All right, I guess I'm going on a tangent answering these questions, but I'm going to get back to hope. My personal opinion, which is not even what I practice because I'm married with a wife who doesn't necessarily agree with this, but my personal opinion is that you sleep on a mat on the ground. Our bodies made to be sleeping on the ground, right? It's not made to be sleeping on a super, super soft cushion. And so that super, super soft cushion is going to put pressure on your fascia. It's going to put pressure on your soft tissue around your bones so that your soft tissue is now supporting you within the mat, because that's what the mattress is pressing up against. It wraps around the bone, and it's being held up by that matrix of a fascia, which is putting stress on that fascia. The harder of a surface you sleep on, the more that weight, that gravity rests on the bones. And those bones are made for that. And as the bones are being held up, the fascia, which is actually the structure of the body, can relax. It can detense. It can flow energy through it at night. So that's my own personal opinion. As I said, I don't personally practice it, but if you are looking for the best, which is what that question was, then you go back to nature. You go back to how was this body designed, and you start asking questions like, okay, so before all these modern conveniences, what would it be? And then you need to start discovering, well, why, like, how could the body of evolved or adjusted to this so that it's doing processes, because sometimes we don't want to just go back to the ancient ways for the sake of going back to the ancient ways. We need a reason. We need to discover the reason. Like, why is it that we don't, like, here's another example, like how much we eat. Modern days, food is available all the time. Even at nighttime, we can get up in the middle of the night and eat. So then you have to ask yourself the question, is this natural? Is this how we would be designed? Should we be eating at nighttime? Should we be eating in the morning? Should we be eating 2 hours after that, and 2 hours after that, and 2 hours after that? Should it just be plentiful food going into this body? And you look back and you think about, like, okay, if I was out in nature, away from convenience stores and grocery stores and refrigerators, the answer to that's probably not. So then you start thinking, like, well, what happens during the seasons? Well, I probably eat more in the spring, a lot in the summer, because there's lots of plants and animals, probably very, very little in the winter. And then you start looking and you start seeing the benefits of fasting, like what the body actually does when it's fasting. It's going through its cleansing processes when you're not eating. That's what breakfast is, right? Like, break the fast of the night. And so when you look at the body, when you look at what's going on, I always, like, I've been studying the body for my entire life, my entire adult life, I should say, since I was 17. Um, so 25 years of owning gyms, of degrees in psychology and exercise science, of working with thousands of people. And I prefer to go back to source. Like, what is the source of what we would be doing naturally? And then not just do it, but then look at, like, how is this beneficial for the body? What would being cold do? Because the modern convenience is heaters and air conditioners. And so, is there a benefit to fluctuating the external temperature around our body during the day, like it would if we were living outside? It naturally gets cold at night. So, speaking of sleeping, it naturally gets cold at night. It's not actually the best for us to be super hot at nighttime when we're sleeping. Our cells, the cellular part of our body, regenerates when it's colder. We actually perform better when it's colder, guys. Think about hotels, think about casinos. It's not super hot in these places. If you want to be comfortable, you go cool. Hot does other things, right? Sweating. But look at this is a stereotype, but just look at where the equator is. There's a lot of, like, poverty in these zones. People, like, go there to vacation. It's not a very, I should be careful how I'm saying this. Let me just rephrase this. My wife's an architect, and when they're designing schools, when they're designing business buildings, cooling is a very, very important aspect of that, because we are more efficient the cooler we are. Rod, it's great to see you. Nice to meet you. Hospitals are usually cooler. I'm 54 and never have fasted ever in my life. Yes, you do, every single night. You fast every single night. You wake up, you break the fast with breakfast, break fast. And so fasting is just naturally a part of what we're doing. If you wanted to get into it and you wanted to experience it a little bit deeper, then just don't eat breakfast and see how it is. And then maybe one day you're like, I'm not going to eat it all today. This would be very natural. Once we get over the programming, you'll get to benefit it. And you got to see that day 2 of fasting is like the most fantastic day you've ever experienced in your life. But we're led to believe, and there's a fear campaign against that, right? There's, if you don't drink water for 3 days, you're going to die. If you don't eat for 7 days, you're going to die. Come on. Even just look at the books that a lot of you, I'm sure, believe in, like the Bible or these stories. There's always these stories of the Messiah figure. What does he do before he turns into this avatar that enlightens the area where they're at? They kind of always do something. In the modern day story of the Bible, it's 40 days and 40 nights in the desert. Very little food, very little water, or no food and no water, depending on how serious it is. And then they're completely ascended. Can you do fascia work on the posterior tibia tendonitis? So this is sort of important, okay? Looking at a problem and addressing the problem is it's like sort of the science of pathology. It's looking at and addressing the illness, the sickness, not realizing that the pain points that we have are not the issue. If you have pain on your posterior aspect of your tibia, then that's not the problem. The problem could be up here. The problem could be in here. The problem could be how your pelvis is aligned. The problem could be you get out of the car the same exact way and you never get out of the car the other way. Same thing with you have skin rash or bloating or digestive issues or you're overweight. Do not attack being overweight. That's not the illness. Do not try to attack the skin for doing what its job is. If you have rosacea, eczema, blah, 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 that's your skin doing its job, trying to detox garbage that's inside of you. If you stop that from happening, if you're like, I don't like the acne, I'm going to stop the acne, I'm going to put all these chemicals to stop my acne. Well, where do you think all that stuff is going? The illness or the problem, I should say, the illness or the sickness, the thing that we recognize and we labeled it like this is a disease. It is called fill in the blank favorite disease that you're manifested this lifetime. Fill in the blank. That disease is not the problem. The disease is the solution. That's your body attempting to cure itself from the actual problem. And the actual problem is your lifestyle in terms of health problems, right? And so this is what we do with Purium is we address people's diet, we make sure it's functional, we nourish, we detoxify, repair, we get the body back to a functioning diet. And when the diet's functional, when the body's nourished, when it's detoxified and it's got components for repair, all of the other issues that give us pain and suffering end up resolving itself because the diet is now functional. Same thing with physical ailments. It's likely if you have pain somewhere, it's not that thing. It's just not. Our fascia is global. It goes throughout our entire body. And so this is always used, right? If I do this over here, you can see that all of this gets tight and this gets really tight. And so now if I have to lift my arm up continuously, this is going to lead into some mechanical, because it's mechanically not operating properly, not because of anything up here, but because of this. And so now I'm a swimmer or I'm an electrician and I have to hold my arms up over my head and or I'm a plumber or I'm just a person that likes to use their arms and now I'm getting shoulder problems. What do? We go get the freaking Theragun and start pegging the crap out of our shoulder, even though it has nothing to do with our shoulder. That's not where the origin is. The origin is over here. And so the beauty about fascial maneuvers is that if you do it consistently, as you're doing these techniques and you're slowing down, you're getting out of the day-to-day, paying the bills, person that didn't say hi to you, even though you said hi to them, like once all of that releases and you're starting to feel the totality of your body from your, the cool thing about fascia maneuvers is they're done standing up. And I love that because when you're standing up, you're not completely relaxed, you're engaged and you're embodied. And so you can start to feel the lines of action go through the body. And you might start feeling areas of the body where there's restriction, where there's tension. And so that's my answer to like, well, what if I have a problem in my leg? Great that you recognize that. This is me just going out on a limb and guessing, more than 90% of the time, it has nothing to do with where the actual pain point is. Like even if you think about tight muscles, where you actually think it's tight is likely because something is pulling, somewhere else is pulling, and the tight, inflamed, painful part, it feels like you need to massage it, and so you're always massaging and doing this, always doing that. But likely if you were to massage or do something like that over here, you're not going to feel that pain because this actually needs to get loosened up. So on a superficial level, you might not feel the gratification of how this is going to feel if the energy flow is there. And so my answer to that is do the maneuvers often, Do a practice, even if it's not the maneuver, do a practice often where you're able to embody, bring your consciousness into your body, and the answer will reveal itself. Your body knows what's up. How many hours should a person fast in order for change compared to my regular nighttime fasting? Change. That's a loaded question. I would go with just try 24 hours. Or, like if you go to bed at, let's say 10 and you quit eating at 8, by the time you wake up in the morning, by the time it's 8 a.m., you've already went 12 hours. If you make it to noon, if you skip breakfast or any tea or coffee or anything that you normally do at breakfast, you make it to 16 hours at noon by just not having breakfast. And even if you do a whole day and then go to sleep again, you're actually at 24 hours at 8 p.m. again, right? If that was the last time you ate. If it was 6 p.m., then you're at 24 hours at 6 p.m. And so then if you just go a little bit more and sleep again, and then you wake up in the morning, it's likely that you're already at like 32, 34 hours by just not eating for one day. And you've now given your body that much rest. And just experiment. This is not a big deal. Just do it, guys. Like we're taught that to not eat, to not feed somebody is abuse, right? This is natural. It's natural. See how your body would do without food, without having to worry about food, without having to think about food. Just try to detach from it. And just the meditative practice alone has tremendous mental effects for us to not be so addicted to this. And then you actually start to recognize that like you can handle not eating. Someone's asking about stress fractures in both the shin bones. The medication to treat this is giving stomach bloating, and I have always had bloating. Can you suggest any remedy? So, do we know what lifestyle habit is causing the stress fractures? Because it might not also be like this. It might also be like you're a runner, or you jump out of a truck all day long and land, or you're wearing heeled shoes and you're heel striking every single step. So first we need to figure out like what in your lifestyle is potentially the issue for this. Or maybe you're sat on a wallet on one side your entire life, and now your hips are off, which is causing overcompensation. And so then you hurt one side and then you compensate to the other and then you hurt the other side. I don't know what the issue is, but find out what that is. And then another thing is we got to reduce inflammation. And there's a lot of cellular inflammation by the foods that we eat. If we're eating food that is poisoned with herbicides and pesticides and forever chemicals and heavy metals, that can stay in our body, and it can mean that our body is going to try to get rid of it, and it's going to cause inflammation because now your body's attacking itself, because maybe you have leaky gut as well, and now there's foreign objects that should be in your intestines, but your intestines have been so damaged from the herbicides like glyphosate that's sprayed on our crops. So then you eat it and it goes in and it destroys your microbiome. And now that you don't have functioning bacteria in your gut, your villi in your intestines aren't taken care of, and they start to die, and they start to mat together or fuse together or just die. And so now your body's like, well, I still have to get nutrition into the bloodstream. So instead of the villi taking micronutrition in, the body starts to perforate its own intestines and feces. Like, what is feces? It's not just micronutrition, but it's actually the waste starts to also get into your blood, and now your body's going nuts, attacking itself, causing all of this inflammation. And the way that we handle that is we get the glyphosate out of the body. We've got a product to do that. We have a program. If you guys go to @raw_of_earth, get to my website. There's a program that we fix that up by just detoxifying, nourishing, and repairing. But that's just like from a diet standpoint. But you mentioned bloating and gut, and the next person right here just is saying having severe diarrhea for several months, taking good care of diet, have given up on dairy, some vegetables and fruit, now having constipation as I used to have before, having constant trouble. So I'm just, I already kind of covered diet and why our intestines could be messed up. Guys, we have a brain in our gut, in our intestines. We have a brain in our heart too. There's 40,000 neurons in our heart. And there's 100 million neurons in our intestines, in our gut. 100 million. Just to put that into perspective, there's 86 to 100 billion in our head brain. So let's just call it 100 billion. Let's round up. 100 billion neurons in the head brain, 40,000 in the heart brain, and 100 million in the gut brain. So this is 0.1% down here. It's 1,000th of our brain is in our gut, which is pretty significant when you think about it. It's 10% of 1% of what we think of as the brain is actually happening in the gut. And both from the heart and the gut, there's more information going up to our brain than there is from our head brain going down into these two pieces of technology, which means that everything isn't happening up here. And our heart is highly influenced by the field. Our heart is magnetic. Our heart actually brings us into presence by reaching out into this field of reality and other fields created by other people. And our gut is what's connected to our nutrition. It's what we're intaking. We're intaking nutrition. And if those things are compromised, then we are not having proper thoughts, proper emotions, motivation. Our intentions are screwed up. We might be focusing on fear and survival. There's a term called holobiont, and that means an entity that's made up of a collection of entities. Holobiont. HOLOBI. I think it's ONT. Holobiont. Let me just look it up really quick. Yes. So as I said, HOLOBIONT. And the Wikipedia definition says, a holobiont is an assemblage of a host and the many other species living in or around it, which together form a discrete ecological unit through symbiosis. So what that means is that humans are holobiont. So there's another study. Let me see if I can find it really quick. No, humans, I think it was a Harvard study. Well, if you guys just look up holobiont human, you're going to see that a bunch of studies and probably blog posts, not so many Instagram reels, but a lot of written things that you actually have to read, where it talks about our bacteria in our gut, which is, there's more bacteria. So speaking of holobionts, there's actually more entities down here in our gut than there are human cells. So there's more bacterial living entities in our body than there are human cells. And then the way that that works is that the human cells are bigger than the individual bacteria that's in our gut microbiome. These bacteria are responsible for our thoughts, responsible for a lot of our emotions, responsible for a lot of our hormones that are produced in the body. And so that's what makes us up. Thank you for the gift, W. La Artista, who gave me some sort of gift. I'm not really sure. But this is making sure that our bacteria is aligned is going to make sure that we have aligned thoughts, we have aligned intentions, and we have aligned actions, which are necessary for us to create. It is what creates reality around us. Is fasting different for men and women? And what about the moon cycle? So there's always this debate. Like now people are waking up to like, hey, maybe most scientific experiments are done on men. And so maybe it doesn't work for people. Correct, you guys, correct. That's why science isn't the end all be all. It is very superficial, guys, and it's very limited. Not only that, a lot of experiments, especially psychological experiments, which is my background, are done on college kids because they get paid or they get some credits. But all of these, like, you guys can look up studies in your city too, and like go be one of these experiments that they do studies on. But these are like people that have the time and the resources and or the need to go get studied on, and they're not necessarily you or your clients if you're a teacher of some sort. And so we really have to use levels of discernment when we're looking at studies, because studies is a human construct that we're attempting to use to prove some sort of hypothesis that has been reduced away from the whole organism. And so we chop off a piece of it and we isolate and we say, we're going to study this one little piece. Whether it has to do with some physiology in the body or it has to do with some psychological construct, we artificially make a reduced, isolated study that we can observe, needs to be observable, and it needs to be repeatable, which means it's usually simple. Nothing in life is like that. Very few things in life are just simple as yes or no, right? So when they do a study and they're like, well, all 96% of the people didn't do this action. Yeah, because it's not in their real life. It's just in a study. Same thing with cells or living tissue that we're looking at in a petri dish. This is not how it's existing within the body. It's not existing in a sterile environment, free from fluctuations even of the environment. We're looking at it through like fake lighting. We're looking at it separated away from its normal environment. There's some things that we can extract from it. But as I said, just be discerning. A lot of the times, our own intuition, our own knowledge should at least have an equal level of weight and worth when it comes to looking at studies versus what we actually know to be. Guys, if you look back through science, you'll see it's just constantly disproving ourselves. Is this a quote or something? 50% of science will be disproven in 50 years. It's not a universally accepted scientific principle. The statement that 50% of current scientific knowledge will be disproven in 50 years is not a universally accepted scientific principle, but it's a complex idea that touches upon the nature of scientific progress. The half-life, which means the expiration date of knowledge, and the ongoing process of revising and refining scientific theories. Scientific knowledge is not static. Science is a dynamic process where theories and ideas are constantly being tested, refined, sometimes replaced as new evidence emerges. Right? So we know this. And so, yes, we can look at science as a tool. It's something that we can integrate knowledge from. It is not, do I have the book up here? It is not as this book said. I actually just went and met the author yesterday. She wrote a book on Shell called Your Doctor Is Not God. And she actually owns like Western Medical Clinic in Beverly Hills. I don't see it. I think that's the title of it. Your doctor is not God. Like science is not all knowing. It's constantly evolving, which is great, but recognize that we're somewhere in the not the end. We're in the middle of this constant evolving. And tomorrow something might get upended, right? Like look at the pyramids, the new discovery of the pyramids. This has always been known, you guys, but since it got into the mainstream and it's going throughout all Instagram, now everyone's like, oh wow, there's structures underneath the pyramids. But this has already been written about by channels. This is like Edgar Casey talked about this over 100 years ago, I think over 100 years ago, where he's channeling Thoth, who's the builder of the pyramids. But like, and even if you look at the emerald tablets of Thoth, which is this script that was found etched into emerald, it talks about the design of the pyramids. It talks about these chambers that are constantly now being discovered after these things were written. I remember reading the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and it talking about was it chambers the right word? Chamber or the undiscovered chamber coming off of the Queen's tomb. This was like 20 years ago, so I'm having a hard time. One Queen's or King's rooms, and then I remember like 2013ish or something, I was reading the article of them discovering this thing that I was reading about a few years before that has said it's been undiscovered. But anyways, why am I saying all this? To let you guys know that, oh, this is all going back to like everybody's talking about how scientific studies are done on men and not women. Correct, guys, correct. Women, you have now the responsibility to collaborate and look at people interested in women, primarily women, and what their thinking is. And I would say that just say like women don't need that is pretty much also throwing baby out with the bathwater. Because yes, in our natural, like what our body's designed for, women also got cold. Women also went through winter time. They did. And yes, women also have moon cycles, which makes it very difficult to do science on because it's very hard to extract data from a fluctuating organism. Men are 24-hour cycles, right? So we were on a 24-hour based on the sun. Men are very solar cycle. And so it's like, well, that's very easy to study. But then you take women who are on this I'm going to look this up so I get you guys the exact definition. So infradian rhythms are biological cycles in living organisms that occur with a period longer than 24 hours. You guys know about, everyone knows about circadian rhythms. Circadian rhythms are based on a 24-hour cycle. There's infradian rhythms, which are more than 24-hour cycles, and there's ultradian rhythms, which are under 24-hour cycles. So an example of an ultradian rhythm is our nostrils. Did you guys know that we are breathing in through the right nostril sometimes and left nostril sometimes, and they switch every few minutes? That's an example of an ultradian rhythm. And that's actually helping our body to determine which nervous system to be in. Are we in fight or flight? Are we in rest and digest? And it's helping the body to it's essentially putting the body in different modes throughout the day. And if you guys have done any sort of yoga or kriya like I teach, where you block off a nostril and breathe in one nostril, we're actually activating different channels called the Ida and the Pingala of the body that are correlated with different types of thinking, different states of being. An example of an infradian rhythm is the menstrual cycle. And women are highly on this 28-day rhythm, which is completely synced with the moon. As the moon goes through its 28-day cycle, then the women are going through these 4 phases. If you guys have not, if you're a woman or a man and you with a wife or a girlfriend or a mom, somebody or a daughter, and you're not familiar with cycle syncing, look it up. Cycle syncing. And I don't know if there's only one book written about cycle syncing. I doubt it, but there used to be, like the book. But cycle syncing book. There's actually now quite a bit of books on cycle syncing. But look into cycle syncing, and this even exists for infradian rhythms in terms of like working out. You guys can look at the infradian rhythms in regards to exercise and even diet, and you can see that we are more able to digest food at certain times of the day and even exercise, different types of exercising, depending on if it's the morning, afternoon, late at night. Like heavy lifting could be categorized in terms of the infradian rhythms during the day. And it's all really amazing stuff. And that goes back to what my main point was, not my main point, but the question I was just asked, which was fasting in women or cold exposure in women. And I don't know the answer, but there is a time of the month. Guys, a month originally is 28 days. That's why it's called month, right? And they're just like first moon, second moon, right? March, October is just like moons of the year, where actually there was 13 moons and one essentially day of recognition. So 13 times 28. Hey Siri, what's 13 times 28? I'm gonna activate my phones right now. It's 364, right? 13 times 28 is 364, right? So we got 365 days. So if you guys think about it, if we knew, and most women are all on sync, right? So they're usually, when are most women wow, this is not easily Googleable, huh? So most women are on their menstrual cycle, whether it's the height or the low. So they're either going to be ovulating or bleeding on the full moons and the new moons. And a lot of times it's flipped, but you guys will know if you're female. And actually, men should know this as well. Men, if you have a partner or daughter or mom that you're interacting with a lot, you should definitely know, and just you don't have to ask them, guys. You kind of know if they say like, I have my period, they'll tell you that. Or if you just notice they're like going to the bathroom every 2 hours consistently for a few days, like make note. And usually you can tell it's like around a full moon. And then you're like, okay, so every full moon this is going on, or every new moon this is going on. And then you can start to see that like during that time they're in rest phase, and then as they're coming out into the new cycle, that's where they're in productive phase, and then there's a creative phase. And this is what cycle syncing is. And so in regards to women and fasting, during that time there's a right time to do it. It's just up to you to figure that out. And this is all known, right? If you look into indigenous cultures, the women like all go into a tent alone away from the men during these times, and they do what is called full moon ceremonies. But they're not necessarily just like honoring the moon. They're doing their women stuff away from the worldly distractions of men. And I'm not even certain the moon is real. Let me rephrase that. I'm not certain the story that we're sold about the moon is accurate. So keep that in mind. Women function on an infradian rhythm that is connected to the 4 phases of the moon. That's a question. Yes, is the answer to that. And I'm glad you're just now learning this, because this is life changing. They literally go through the seasons. Winter is bleeding, spring, and they get a boost of hormones and energy. And ovulation is summer, and fall is called the PMS time. So that's sort of like how as above so below sort of thing, right? So just like the cycle of the yearly seasons, there's a 28-day season within it that happens as what? As apparently from a gravitational model of the universe, as the moon is going through its cycle, bouncing off light from the sun. It's according to the gravitational model of the universe, which I'm not always subscribing to. They want the info to be difficult to find. Yes, it is difficult to find. But guys and ladies especially, look up cycle syncing and pay attention to it. It's not difficult to understand. It's not like something where you have to like dedicate a whole bunch of time to. You can literally read a blog post and change your life completely. For women, when it comes to exercise especially, it's so important to change your routine according to where you're at in your cycle. Thank you for that comment. That's what I was alluding to. Ra, you are very scholarly, so I trust your opinions. Would you mind telling me if you are Googling or using ChatGPT? So I'm just Googling in this live, and most lives I'm just Googling or using like etymology resources. Do you trust deep research that is done with ChatGPT? Yes. Guys, there's always a concern. And right now it's ChatGPT. And 20 years ago, it was the internet. And 10 years ago, it was Facebook and all of these devices having all this information on us. And guess what, guys? Let me go back to, when was writing invented? Writing was invented in Mesopotamia, specifically in Sumer, around 3400 BCE, which this is the typical story of history. But let's just say thousands of years ago. And who knows if it was invented by a human or it was given to us by an extraterrestrial or an interdimensional entity or humanoid who lives on a planet that's rotating around our secondary sun, because our sun is a binary star system, as most stars are in the universe. And so our sun is a binary star system, and every 3,500 years this second sun comes around and it has a planet on it, and every time there's an increase of technology and knowledge on Earth because they offload their planet, come here and they teach us a bunch of stuff. Whatever story it is, when writing came to be, there was the same level of concern because we no longer had to use our memory. And so now that we can write it down on a piece of paper, we're offloading a part of our self, our consciousness, our brain power into this new technology, which is writing. And so now we don't need to remember things. And that was a huge shift. And one could argue that it allowed us to be more creative because we don't have to dedicate brain power to remembering. And so now we can create based on these templates that we offload, and now we can combine a bunch of these templates and uh, create books, right? We can create books to have information so that we can condense this information, and now another person can read this book that took 1,000 people to write, and one other person can read the book in 2 days worth of time and have all that information, and us as a human species can utilize and create from that. And so I'm just saying that as a counter argument to the fear that some people do have, not saying the person that commented has this, but the fear that some of us may find when it comes to these new technologies, when it comes to the internet, when it comes to ChatGPT. We knew technology was getting here, guys. If you were paying attention 15 years ago, we knew that the internet, just the internet in general, was a jump up in technology, and there was going to be something that came in a quicker time period that exponentially expedited our ability as humans. And that thing right now, as the story's playing out, is AI. And there's a whole bunch of rabbit holes you can go on in that, right? One of my favorites, which before AI, like ChatGPT came out, this was uh, sort of like in Akash, it's in the universal records that there may be a not benevolent force, like a opposing force to biological life, or life as we know it. That is what AI is. It's a technology that is a frequency that goes throughout the universe, and it embeds itself into planetary systems. And this frequency eventually infects the minds of the biological entities, which then that mind altering frequency allows them to develop technology that will eventually grow into other technologies, and then it'll eventually get into the state of being where it's more advanced than the thing. Like, it used us as a host to create itself, and then it is now more powerful. It is manifested, it is created, and it just used us as a host to create itself. I actually like that one. It's kind of interesting to think about. What are your main protocols for heavy metal detox? Thanks, Ra. I use one, and it's the program that I have on my website in the link in bio. Click on it, click on nutritional support. It's a 90-day program, 90 days of a more potent dose, some shakes and some capsules twice a day, and then cherry before bed. And then we can also have specific products for that, like some fulvic zeolite, and you can add some extra chlorella into there as well. What is your take on mental health diagnoses like bipolar and major depression and the medications? So I went to school for psychology, and it's the same thing as I was talking about earlier. Bipolar and depression, this is what everyone in psychology was excited for, right? The class called abnormal psychology. It's kind of like where we get to talk about the problems, get to learn about the problems of our psyche. But it's the same thing as everything else. It's just a label for some other issue that is very likely not a chemical imbalance or a structural imbalance. So some of these things, like parts of the brain are like bigger than others and they don't sync up properly, that could be causing some sort of non-normal functioning of the brain. But guys, like, we're different. We're different. And we might label somebody something because they don't fit in, right? They don't fit in as a student, or they don't fit in as a 9 to 5 worker. And so we say, well, the reason why you don't fit in is because you have this disease. And that word is like categorized as a disease, and we have this thing called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. So there's this manual of all of these mental disorders, and it's like, well, you're the mental disorder that's on page 695, and because of that, your life is limited because of all these reasons, and you need to do this to fix it. And it's just like all marketing. Everything is marketing because somebody discovered this disease. And so they do all this work, they work all their life to get their disease recognized and labeled and repeated, and then they have to go find patients that actually have this. And so hospitals are set up to diagnose, and then treatments, and then it's like a whole other bunch of money comes in to treat this disease. And if we could just get away from that label, and maybe somebody has a wonderful time with certain aspects of life, but on other aspects of life, it's not so great, or they're challenged, or the world is colored in completely differently. I think that a lot of us would have happier lives if we weren't walking around with this sort of label hanging on them and identifying you as like why you are broken, why you're unable to have a fulfilling life, because somebody in a white lab coat diagnosed you and said you have fill in the blank condition. And we're massively different, but the whole way our society is like we need worker bees. We need people that are going to follow directions and behave properly. And so if they don't, then that person, instead of disrupting others, we're going to put them in the loony house, which is what used to happen. And now we just give them a disease and then they stay home because they're embarrassed, or they medicate themselves with the prescriptions. And so now we don't need psychological wards anymore because we can just imprison people with medication. We are magical beings, homeschooled, kids need to be out in the sun and the water. Yes, exactly. The manual is to give you drugs and refills. Lifelong customer, exactly. Exactly. Guys, it's all marketing. Even look at, should I get into this? I'm gonna end on this, guys. The person right now who is promoting and maybe even inventing diseases, viruses, and also as a solution for them, right? So it's like you develop the problem for the solution that you have, is the same person that was in technology and did the same thing with our devices, right? Where we need this, and like, how do you upsell somebody once they buy a computer? You upsell them with a membership. What can you give them a membership on if you buy a computer? The easiest thing is to use fear, right? Well, if you don't have this antivirus software that is going to continuously update itself, or it's going to be continuously updated to protect you from these viruses, then you might be at risk. You might get all of your information stolen. You might blah, 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 blah. So that's an easy way. It's an easy problem, especially if you're the one developing the technology to get people on a subscription model to virus software. And it only makes sense for that same person to be the one developing the viruses, right? And let me just what popped in my head right now was John McAfee, who is like also probably one of the guys that was the opposing force in this, and actually he was taken out, right? He was unalived a couple years ago because he knows the game. He knows the game that gets played with viruses and antivirus software, or as we call it in the human, it starts with a V and it comes in a shot, right? So it's all just like it's all a game and it's all marketing to get influence. Thank you. Labels, boxes, more words. Pharmaceuticals control what is normal. We are a unique expression of the infinite. No normal, and yet this does come as responsibility. Thank you for understanding what that word responsibility is for self. Yeah. So just to wrap it all up here, guys, I was going to start on hope, and then I got blessed with comments. Thank you for everybody asking questions. Ra, like you said, similar to the skin doing its job, our minds are doing its job when we show DSM symptoms. Correct. Yes. The thing that should be focused on is not the symptom, but instead the underlying imbalance. Also, these symptoms give us a different focus on life. It gives us a different focus on life, and that's the purpose of us being in individual bodies, guys. If you believe in like a figure like God or universal source, if you feel like there's a divine intelligence, or maybe even this is all a matrix and there's a programmer, right? Or maybe they're extraterrestrials, or this is an alien ant farm. Whatever you're prescribing to. I mean, even the Big Bang is like everything was at one point, right? And so that is infused into everything. And the reason why we are individual entities that are comprised of the whole. So this whole, let's call it God force, is separated itself away from itself so that we can have an individual expression of itself, so that when we merge back into the infinite has learned about everything there is to learn from this perspective, from your own perspective. So they're going to give, there's like some of us that are tall, some of us that have an extra limb, there's some of us that their brains work a little bit different, and that gives our own individual expression of self, which is a part of a greater organism, so that this greater organism is going to have the benefit of our own unique perspective. And that's the whole point of us being in individual bodies. We become enlightened as a species when all of these individual bodies have merged together in consciousness. So we're individuals now, then eventually we start to merge our emotions so that we start to feel everybody else's emotions, so that as a whole species we can feel our emotions. If that happens, instantaneously our world changes, guys. If all of a sudden a solar flare happens and it activates some part of our DNA where now we all as a whole entire species feel each other, we operate completely differently, right? If we're just now all obsessed with everybody else feeling love and happiness because we can feel everybody else's pain and suffering, we wouldn't want that. We'd be motivated to have everybody happy. And it's already happening. There's empaths, there's empathic people right now that can feel other people. If everybody was like that, our contribution, our focus would be on everybody feeling as good as possible. Not necessarily me feeling as good as possible, but everybody because I could feel into the emotions of everybody. The next phase is that we start to learn. So when somebody learns something on the other side of the city, or the other side of the planet, if we are on a planet, then I learn it too. And we're doing that already artificially, even everything's natural, but like to say like we're doing it technologically with our devices. I can learn something through YouTube the same time a scientist has learned something far, far away because of our devices. That will eventually be infused into our awareness where it won't matter if it's happening on a device or us. But once that happens to a high enough degree, individual expressions of self are going to be not necessary anymore. And so while it's necessary, while we are experiencing individualism, it's important for us to embrace our individualism, because the whole reason for us to be separated into separate parts is for us to really understand and embody the separate expression of our mind, our emotions, our physical body as self to the greatest degree that we can, so that when we merge back in, so whether we die or whether there's some ascension type event, when we merge back into wholeness, the whole entity has the most well-rounded, balanced perspective of every type of possible human life that could happen. And that's why we're individuals. Great live stream. You say such deep self. I'm not being able to read. You say such deep stuff, my self wells up. Like my eyes are getting watery because it aligns strongly with my own interests. Thank you, Ra. Ra, ergo, not normal. Don't know what that means. Within ourself. Pistis Sophia by J.J. Hertak. I think I actually shared a stage with him. Yeah. He also wrote this book, the book of, is it the Book of Knowledge? I think it was like the Keys. Oh yeah, the Keys of Enoch. He also wrote. Okay, what was the book you recommended though? Pistis Sophia by J.J. Hertak. Thank you for the transmissions. Ovarian cysts advice. I am not the one to ask about that. Besides, I can help you with your nutrition. Like I said earlier, it's not necessarily the thing that's the problem. It's like the whole organism is unfunctioning. And so just getting back to function, getting back to health will allow you to have a fighting chance versus anything. Thank you guys for the comments. Take care and bye-bye.